I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's not enough to say it's nuts. You have to explain why it's so nuts. The invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guests are Jerry Marzinsky and Patrick. First, be sure to check out my films. Doors of Perception is on Amazon Prime. Occult Louisiana is on Tubi, Roku Channel, Apple, and more. We're booking guests for November. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome Jerry Marzinsky and Patrick. Jerry is a retired licensed psychotherapist, now author with over 35 years of experience working with and studying the thought processes and voices heard by psychotic and criminally insane patients in some of the most volatile psychiatric institutions in the nation. Patrick is a former meth addict that spent a year in a mental health facility and now speaks out about the corruption within these state facilities. Jerry, Patrick, welcome. How y'all doing?
Good. Doing real well. Thanks for having us.
Thank you both for coming on. Jerry, thank you for coming back. Jerry, of course, is back once again to share his insights about Patrick's story. And Patrick is here to tell his incredible experiences within and ultimately an escape from a Texas mental health facility. This is such important information to share. Quite shocking, actually. And Patrick, this is your first time on. Before we get too deep into everything, first just tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Patrick Durkin. I wrote the book Fire and Ice, the Meth Bible, under the name Boston Born Again. And I was a crystal meth addict. I was trapped in addiction, and that led me into living in a mental institution for the criminally insane. 2 different facilities. One was Vernon Maximum Security in Vernon, Texas, and the second one was in San Antonio State Hospital, and it was a wild ride because when I was there, I was completely sane.
Wow, very interesting. And Jerry, just remind the audience briefly a little bit about yourself. Let them know how they can find out more about you.
Well, my name's Jerry Marzinsky. I've been working on the front lines of mental health for close to 50 years now. And we're going to bring you an inside story today via Patrick of what it's like to be trapped on one of these big psychiatric hospitals when you're sane and you can't get out. Now, a little bit of history behind what happened here is back in the 70s, there was Proposition 13 started in California, which was a tax rebellion. They got tired of paying the increasingly large taxes. So the population, well, we're not doing it anymore. So the government says, okay, we're going to have to shut down some stuff. One of the first things they shut down were state hospitals, mental hospitals. So here's these people who are schizophrenic. They're seriously mentally ill. They couldn't work. They couldn't hold a job. And they were saying, okay, we're going to set up mental health centers all over the U.S. Then they will increase the number of mental health centers. These people should be in a more normal population. That's not what happened. And they wouldn't take their medications even when they were in the state hospital. And they certainly weren't going to go out of the way to take them when the hospitals are closed down. So they close these places down. And back in the 70s, you didn't see people laying all over the streets in tents, homeless, unable to work, committing crimes. The crime rate soared. Once they closed these hospitals, the crime rate soared. What are these people going to do? They can't work. They can't feed themselves. They're going to either sell drugs, use drugs, or rob, steal, break into people's houses. So the crime rate shot up. On top of that, they're going, oh, we're going to save money. I'd say more than half of these people ended up in state prisons at more than twice the cost of keeping them in a state hospital. right?
Wow.
So even when they were in the state hospital, they at least they got food, they had housing, they weren't out causing trouble, they got their medications, they had some place to live. Nobody was being cured of anything. They were drugging down these entire populations of people in those hospitals. Nobody was being cured. The pharmaceutical industry was making a fortune. Psychiatrists were making a fortune. The conditions within these hospitals were sickening. I worked in one for 7 years. The outside grounds, when you got onto the grounds, it was beautiful. I mean, they just had manicured lawn. It looked like, some kind of rich man's mansion or something. But once you got in there, if you could get in there, and the regular population could not, right, it was a horror show. In many of those words, it was a horror show. There are people being bit, assaulted. There's one time I remember that one patient bit the ear off another one, wow. And then the whole ward wanted to have a funeral for that ear. So they put that ear into a shoebox on the nurse's desk, and it was there in the morning. And then all the patients go, "We have to have a funeral. We have to have a funeral." So they let them all outside. They dug a grave for the ear and gave a little sermon for the ear. And buried the ear. So, and it gets worse than that. That's just one of the, it gets much worse than that. It gets so gross. There's stuff I don't want to even talk about. I'm sure Patrick's seen that.
Yep.
So here now you have this set of mental health centers all over the U.S. that are overwhelmed. I had one lady when I was working psych crisis in one of the emergency rooms. She was going nuts. She tried to go to the mental health center, and they wouldn't let her in. They wouldn't enroll her. Okay. So she ended up in the emergency room. Okay. And it just psychotic as a bed bug. The mental health centers are overwhelmed. The psychiatric hospitals are overwhelmed. All the psychiatric facilities are overwhelmed. I mean, these people are not getting cured.
Now you're saying it's still like this?
It's still like this and getting worse.
Wow. The
emergency rooms are full of psych patients. Matter of fact, the doctors are screaming bloody murder because they want those psych patients out of there because they don't know what to do with them.
That's crazy.
So we had to find a place to put them, either send them home or admit them to the hospital. And when you admitted them to the hospital, what they do is they just wait until they ran out of insurance, and then all of a sudden they discharge them.
Yeah.
Right? So they'd fill them full of drugs. These drugs weren't curing anything.
No.
And they were insisting that this was a chemical brain imbalance that started this. There is no chemical brain imbalance. If you look at what psychiatrists are doing, and I've seen it a bunch of times, is they'll bring the patient in, they'll talk to him for a few minutes, what's going on, and then they'll go, okay, they'll give them a diagnosis, and right away they will prescribe a drug for them. So even though they're insisting that this mental illness is a chemical imbalance in the brain, they're not taking any baseline. There's no lab test, there's no EEG, there's no EKG, there's no test whatsoever to determine what of the 200 or so neurotransmitters in the brain are out of whack, or by how much. It's a sham.
I wonder how many of these people are being used as guinea pigs or experimentation for these drugs.
I tell you, as soon as a new drug comes out, man, the drug company representatives were all over that hospital. Try this, try that. Oh, yeah, it has much less side effects. They're always peddling their drugs. We had a constant flow of drug salesmen coming through there.
That's insane.
And they would just bring in hundreds and hundreds of pounds of drugs. They were drugging everybody. But I remember one day, this was maybe in the first month I worked at this hospital. There was a banister. It was like a pipe that ran from the first floor of the psychiatric unit I was working on up to the second floor. The top of this banister on the second floor did not have a metal cap on it. The one on the bottom floor did. Right? So one day I'm walking through the first floor of the psych unit, and here's a maintenance man cutting the cap off of the bottom part of the banister. Right? And that was the most exciting thing going on. There were sparks flying, smoke, all the patients were all there, kind of watching all those, like the fireworks. So I just jumped in the crowd with them and I was just watching it too. And, we were all having like a little fireworks show until that cap fell off of that banister. Once that cap hit the floor, it was followed by a gush of thousands of psychiatric pills came gushing out of that banister. Those patients had been throwing those pills down that banister for decades. It was like a waterfall of multicolored pills hit the floor and spread out all over the place. And I stooped down and I'm looking at those things and I'm going, God, most of them were antipsychotic drugs. And I'm going, each one of these is a vote for a psychiatric patient to stay insane. What is going on with this? But what got my goat is I remember a few times in some of the private psychiatric hospitals I worked, they would bring nursing students through there to let them do a psych residency, and I watched their orientation. They're like, "Oh, don't look these guys in the eyes, man. Don't talk to them. It's like they're going to get killed if they do something." I mean, I worked 7 years on wards, very dangerous wards, and I was never hurt.
Yeah.
I was never threatened. They make it look like the people in these hospitals are murderous lunatics, and that if you walk through one of the wards, they're going to attack you and you're going to die. I mean, they scare the bejesus out of these people. They won't let families onto those wards. They won't let anybody who's unauthorized into that hospital. They don't want people to see what goes on there.
Yeah.
Patrick's going to give you a bird's eye view of what it's like to kind of go nuts and then come off a meth trip and sober up on one of these wards in one of the biggest psychiatric hospitals in San Diego, Texas. So you're going to get a tour that you would never see otherwise.
Patrick, love to hear the story.
It's a fine line between the spiritual realm and mental health. Okay. And my journey starts like that. And I start this story the same way everywhere I tell it. And I said that I'm born on January 31st, 1982. And the devil tried to kill me that day. And I've been fighting for my life ever since. Okay. And there is a correlation directly between the flow of crystal methamphetamines into this country and the state hospital system and the sea of tent cities that you see lining the city streets in the United States, in every major city like Seattle, San Francisco, Austin, Texas. You go anywhere, meth has engulfed this entire country, this entire continent.
When I worked in the state prison, the prison was full of meth addicts who had gone nuts. I'd never seen more people go psychotic on any drug than meth.
Jerry, what do they nickname methamphetamines in the prison system?
They call it the devil's drug.
And they ain't lying, because it is. Now, when I wrote this book, The Meth Bible, I've sold thousands of copies in 10 countries, and it's really one of the only books that talks about the connection between crystal methamphetamines and the supernatural realm. And this all ties into the entire story, okay? I was a full-blown alcoholic at 14 years old. I came from a house, an alcoholic home with childhood trauma, and from my first drink, I was an alcoholic, and then years went by, drug and alcohol addiction. And I'm fast-forwarding through a lot of this story because what we're going to focus on today is the chapter in this book that I titled Dark Days Asylum Nights. And it's my trip inside the mental institution system in the state of Texas. And it mirrors the entire country. Yes. Low funded, but that's the cover story, okay? Because they have these big sprawling places and they are pill mills. They are experimentation centers. And I'm going to get in on all that, and I'm going to give you a bird's eye view that not many people are able to tell, because by the time I got there, I was completely healed. It was an amazing story.
It's like one flew over the cuckoo's nest.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, Hitler was a meth addict.
Yeah, in the book Blitzed by Norman Ohler, the Nazi German army was all on a drug called Pervitin, okay? Yep. Which is basically a crystal meth pill, just like your Adderalls and your Vyvances today, okay? It was pharmaceutical speed. Then they commissioned a chocolate factory in Nazi Germany to lace chocolate with this drug as a pep pill for the workforce. So the whole country of Germany is under the spell of the ice, crystal meth. And they all go along with some of the greatest war crimes and atrocities that this planet's ever seen. Against who? God's chosen people? I mean, it's all tied in together. It's crazy. But I was a businessman, and I was an addict and an alcoholic, and I lost it all in a couple bad business deals. And long story short is, the wife and kids are gone. The absence of the sound of their feet on the floor drove me crazy. I was living in a city called Corpus Christi, Texas, which name quite literally means the body of Christ in Spanish. It's interesting that God let this story unfold in the city after his namesake. I mean, he's an amazing author, I'll tell you that. Okay, so I'm in this city. I lose everything. I end up moving back in with my dad. I'm not in the business world anymore. Now I've been dabbling as a meth addict. Now I'm a full-blown meth addict. And I went on a purposeful 2-year-long suicide mission in the grimy underworld of crystal methamphetamines. I'm a nighttime cab driver. I'm sliding through the city streets in the gutter, the neon slime. My clientele was pimps, prostitutes, drug dealers, money printers, professional thieves, and I got involved in the dark underworld that is drugs, right? And I lost myself. I'm an IV meth user. I started experiencing the supernatural, okay? So many amazing stories, jaw-dropping moments with the Lord Jesus Christ and the devil, walking hand in hand with the serpent and seeking the Lord at the same time. It's a very strange experience. And I went into what's called deep methamphetamine psychosis. Are you familiar with that term?
I am, yes.
Okay, so I start spinning out, they call it, okay? I start having smaller delusions. There's auditory and visual hallucinations. I start to believe that I am the target of this major Hollywood production, if you can wrap your head around this. It's in a chapter in the book called Movie Magic. I start thinking I'm filmed with hidden cameras, which is really common for meth addicts, right? But then satellites, I believe satellites are filming me. After I posted these stories on TikTok and other platforms around the world, the movie The Truman Show, do you remember that with Jim Carrey? There's so many people, it's a phenomenon between 2017 and today where people believe they were in a reboot of the movie The Truman Show. So Jim, if you're watching, I'm waiting on my check still, okay? But I start going, I'm so spun out. I believe Jim Carrey is actually an executive producer in this movie that's being shot about my life. They selected me out of the meth world and whatnot. I'm now walking the city streets. I have a do-rag on. I've got pictures and stuff from this time frame. It's crazy. And I'm walking 15 miles a day, just tortured, demonically possessed. Okay? Total methamphetamine addict, sex and pornography addict, running the whole gambit, physically, spiritually, and emotionally broken. And I find myself living in this trap house that used to be my grandparents' house. And the city actually boards up the whole house. 110 degrees. I'm not eating water, drinking water or eating food for a week at a time. And I am absolutely out of my mind. Wow. And one day, I found out that my father was dead. And 4 hours later, okay, he disappears. And I think he's playing golf in Hawaii as part of the movie script. That's how far out. I was literally mentally challenged. Later on, deemed by the state of Texas unable to stand trial, unfit to stand trial, okay? So I was in the boarded up house, and I woke up, and it was like the Spirit of God came over me. I'd been trying to get into drug treatment for the month leading up to this, and they refused me twice. So we have a broken drug treatment facility industry in this country. I couldn't get the help. I was too crazy for one of those places anyway at this point. But I looked over. I mean, you have to picture this. Trash up to the fiberboard in the house. Needles everywhere. Just drug paraphernalia everywhere. Tons of just homeless people in and out of this house. A shell of a home as it was. I look over and there's a knife on an old ratty nightstand. I picked the knife up and I verbally said, "This ends now." So this was a surrender moment in my addiction. And I walked around the corner. I went about a block up the street and I went into a McDonald's restaurant and I opened the door. I was covered in self-inflicted knife wounds. I opened the door and I had the knife and I screamed, "This is not a robbery. Everybody get up out of here." And the 4 employees ran out the back door. And I was so out of my mind. I'm like, I'm going to do a crime. on purpose to go to jail to get clean because I know I'll do something. I'll be in there for a month, 2 months. I threw the knife down and I ran behind the counter and I took a burger and I poured myself a Coke and I sat down and I waited for the police. They called me the Hamburglar when I got to jail. So I was already famous by the time I got there. So the police came and they pumped a 12-gauge shotgun and came in. I dove on the floor and I surrendered peacefully, but I was charged with aggravated armed robbery in the state of Texas. 3 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon because I had a knife and I scared those folks even though I was 30 feet from them.
Yeah.
And I was charged. The first charge of armed robbery was 5 to 99 years. The consequent 3 charges for assault with a deadly weapon, 2 to 20 years each. That's 156 years stacked, and they wanted to give me 15 years in prison for this. I didn't even look at the cash register. It was my first felony arrest of all time, and it was just a cry for help. But I found myself in some really big trouble, okay?
Yeah.
Now I'm seeking God. I'm having all these spiritual experiences, and now I'm locked up. And I went 8 months with no drugs, okay? And as I'm in there, the psychosis actually got worse, which is really strange. Usually when you take meth out of the equation, then you heal and get better. But after about 90 days, if you don't come out, usually you're cooked for life. Like you never come out. You'll live your entire life in a state hospital, right?
Yeah,
So,
let me comment on that a second. What I saw when in the prison was the prisoners would say they used meth, they'd start hearing voices. And they'd go, oh, that's just a hallucination. When I come down, it'll go away. And it does. And that might happen 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 times. And then one day, it doesn't. Those voices are there, and they are just as nuts as anybody else in that psychiatric hospital. And it's permanent. It's not going anywhere. It's meth-induced psychosis. I've never seen any other drug do that. Only meth.
And what we've came up with, the best way I can describe this is meth does something chemically to the human mind that we don't understand a lot about the brain that opens you wide open to the supernatural realm. And it's never good. It's always negative. It's always the devil. It's always like suicide and terrible thoughts, right, Jerry? Like
right. It's always negative.
The schizophrenic voices that people are hearing have actual personalities, right, Jerry? I mean, it's... People see shadowy figures called the shadow people with glowing eyes, usually green or red, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they see. So really, they call it the devil's drug, and it's not a mistake. I mean, you are wide open to the supernatural realm.
It opens up your spirit to psychic attack like no other drug I've ever seen.
Yeah. There's nothing like it. I've done every drug known to man. And I'm telling you, crystal meth is a different beast, and it opens you up straight to the devil. I mean, I'm talking jaw-dropping, vulgar displays of power. And it turns out it wasn't just me. There's millions of people all over the globe. I get messages from South Africa, from Brisbane, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Germany, like the United Kingdom, Canada, coast to coast, the United States. All these people having the same delusions or spiritual experiences. Now, is it a mass delusion or is it something more? Okay, that's what we have to ask ourselves.
They run the same patterns over and over. There's like 23 patterns that they run. Now, the psychiatric mafia is telling everybody, including their medical students, that these are auditory and visual hallucinations. But the auditory, if they're running patterns, they can't be hallucinations. Hallucinations don't run patterns. And I've spoken to schizophrenics on both sides of the United States and sometimes in between. Those patterns are the same for all of them. It's almost like they're made in some kind of cosmic cookie cutter.
Yeah.
They're always negative. They're anti-religious. They're parasites. They suck the energy out of people.
Patrick, were you experiencing voices as well?
I was having some auditory stuff, but I mean, it was a full gambit for me. It was like the veil to the supernatural world was lifted from my eyes. Crazy stuff. Like they diagnosed me later on with bipolar 1 disorder. It was a misdiagnosis. But what they do is they diagnose you just so they can throw you on a pill real quick. So but yeah, I saw clouds breaking apart and forming hearts. Like, I mean, I thought I could look at something and tell the value of that object. I thought I had supernatural powers. I mean, but I was like seeing things and then they would happen. It's a wild, wild experience. And it's not just me. There's
Yeah.
so many people that have had the same thing.
Yeah.
And I'm in jail now. The other thing is like, why is it God and the devil? Why is it always the dark entities? But then God shows up and gives you this crossroads moment for a way out. Because it was like right near the end where I was having my arrest. It was like God was trying to come in and touch my life, and he wanted me to like see the other side of things during this whole experience. It was really wild. And Jerry, when these voices hear the 23rd Psalm,
Oh yeah,
it's
they
like,
don't like it.
it's like worms on a frying pan, you
Right.
said in your book, right?
Yeah, they hate it.
And it's like, why would a delusion care about the 23rd Psalm? It makes no sense. And why
Exactly.
are we all having the same parallel exact experience in this vast, huge world?
And then why are they always negative? I mean, why aren't they random? If they were hallucinations, they would be random like all other hallucinations. They're not, just like you said. They're
Yep.
consistently, persistently, predictably negative. It's always rotten stuff. You're no good. You're ugly. You're stupid. Nobody likes you. You're every rotten thing that you can think of is what they tell the person.
Yeah.
They're wanting to generate that negative emotional energy, which is what they feed off of. That's their loosh. That's their food.
So I'm so crazy while I'm awaiting trial, right? Like I'm seeing doctors, I'm seeing my lawyer. By chance, God had given me the #2 pay attorney in the whole city of Corpus Christi to be my public defender. I won him in a lottery. I almost fired the guy too because I was so crazy, which I'm like, wow, that could have gone a totally different way, right? So I go and I am so crazy, okay? I have this delusion now where I get this thing in my head where if I read the Holy Bible, some old man slid me a ratty old Bible underneath, and I was in solitary confinement. 23 hours a day in an 8x10 cell. I was out of my mind. But I read the New Testament 3 times, thinking that if I found something in there, they would know that I learned it and they would wrap the movie and I'd get let out. That's the delusion, right? So, but I'm absorbing the word of God. So now we're 8.5 months in. They already rejected my insanity defense because in the United States of America, if you're on drugs, it's like drunk driving. If you ingest something that makes you crazy, and it's not an Axis 1 diagnosis, an insanity defense is completely out the window. So let's put this in perspective before we get to the institution. 1% of felons who go before a judge actually get an insanity defense even heard. 24% of the 1%, so less than a quarter of 1% beat an insanity trial. And drugs disqualify you, okay? They'll comb your Facebook to see if drugs were involved in your story, anything that they can to throw this out, right? Because the trial costs a lot of money. It costs you about $1 million to house somebody. So I go to bed one night, and I am talking to the weatherman on TV. They let me out for 1 hour at about 3 a.m. And we're having a conversation as real as us three right here. Okay, he's talking to me, I'm talking back. I went to bed and I woke up and I was completely healed like I am today.
Wow.
Okay? They could not explain it. They tried to put it in perspective later on. But 2 months later, I go to trial, and my lawyer, I call him at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I have a bench trial at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I get up, I call him, it's 4 in the afternoon, and he goes, "I'm sorry, Mr. Durkin, they're asking 15 years TDC. Now, I'm thinking I'm going to get probation or something. It's my first felony. Nothing happened, but they wanted to make an example out of me that you can't go into a McDonald's with a huge butcher knife and take a burger at knife point, right? So I wake up and I go through this leaky tunnel in the morning, and I walk through and I'm shackled. There was 11 other men and me, 12 men. That was very symbolic to me later on, and I counted them. And we went up in the courtroom, and my lawyer said, "Come on." He goes, "We beat the case. We beat the case." We went in this side room. I said, "What do you mean we beat the case?" He said, "I was at the DA's office after hours. I had your files in my briefcase," because he was getting prepared for court the next morning. The DA caseload had switched by chance. By chance, I mean by God. So I got a brand new DA. And my lawyer's like, "Hey, I got this crazy guy tomorrow. Here's his medical files." And the guy goes, "Yeah, we'll push it through." And he said, don't say a word.
Wow.
Yes. And he's like, just go up and see the judge. It's yes, yes, Your Honor, no, Your Honor. And that's it. And she slammed the gavel and signed it into law. And I beat that case, that aggravated armed robbery with the attachments of assault with a deadly weapon, on not guilty by reason of insanity. One of the rarest court findings that a person can get. Jeffrey Dahmer was too sane for an insanity defense. Let's put that in perspective.
Yeah.
It's a very rare outcome. So my lawyer, he's one of the best there is in the whole city. And this finding is so rare, he doesn't really know what happens next. He tells me, he goes, okay, the next step is they're going to get you a bed. You're going to go up to the state hospital. He goes, 30 days. He goes, you're not, because now he knows I'm healed behind the scenes. And he's like, 30 days, you're going to be home. So about a month later, I get on a bus and we go to Vernon, Texas. This is in a chapter in the book called Dark Days Asylum Nights. It could be its own movie, okay? So I'm on the bus to Vernon, and I get off the bus. I called it Mars. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's Vernon, Texas. There's gun turrets, razor wire, looks like a prison in the middle of nowhere, okay? On the outside. But then you go inside, and it looks like a doctor's office. You ever seen those patent leather green chairs with their couches with the wood frame and all that? That's exactly what it looks like. There's a med line with it's like bulletproof glass in a nurse's station, designed for just handing out pills. That's all it is. So my first night on the tier, I get there 5 minutes in. They take my blood. They're doing the experiments. Like they want to test you for HIV, hepatitis C, anything. There's a CDC lab on site at Vernon. Okay, so God knows what they do at that place. Okay, I mean, it's a CDC lab from the government inside this test facility / mental institution for the criminally insane, right? So who knows what they do? So the first night I saw a guy come out on the tier and another patient walked up and just crushed his face, his nose, broke his nose. And this is where I saw the restraints policy. I'm about to give you a bird's eye view of what these state hospital facilities are really like from the inside out, okay? So the guy hits him, and this is the first time I saw this. Behind the nurse's station in the fridge, they keep these syringe needles preloaded. They have a cocktail in them of, I believe it's Benadryl, Ativan, and Thorazine. It's like a triple cocktail. And they come up and put it in the meteor, right, your shoulder right here, and they plunge that thing, and they go out, and they put him in a chair, restrained here, around your chest, your feet, everything. And it's like a wheelchair with straps. And they wheel you into a little padded room, and you're in there with a tech with a clipboard. They don't move for minimum 5 hours. Okay? They are out like a light. So in that high restraints policy, maximum security hospital, I've seen patients think about getting out of pocket, and they stand up, and they'll see the tech. They'll give them one warning, and they'll sit back down because nobody wants the chair. Jerry knows this. It's really harsh, and it's like people die in these places. Yeah. I've heard of people. The medications kill you from the time you get there. Okay.
Yes, Central State Hospital, where I worked, had a graveyard of 30,000 patients.
That's crazy.
30,000 in 3 different separate graveyards.
Now, this place is co-ed. This place is male and female patients.
That's
now,
bizarre.
Yes, and you're talking the herders of women and children. These are people too crazy for the Texas prison system. This is what it's like all over the country. You're talking true blue serial killers, like where they have everything lined up in their room perfect and they look like the kindest person you've ever seen. And then you hear their rap sheet and you are just mind blown. Now, the text will tell you what everybody's crime is, even though that's against HIPAA rights.
They shouldn't be doing that.
No, but patient relationships with female techs and stuff going on. Totally illegal. Like, this place is wild. Now, Vernon has 2 movie theaters. They have a restaurant where you can get a heck of a cheeseburger. A lot better than the one I got at the McDonald's, I can assure you that. Okay? So you're sitting in there watching like Police Academy or whatever they're showing that night, and you're sitting next to a guy who you know for a fact strangled his wife with pantyhose. Huh. Yes, they have popcorn machines. It's a demonic fun house.
That's crazy.
Day 2. Day 2. I'm in there. Durkin, noon meds. And I'm like, I don't take noon meds. I was like, I only take nighttime meds. You know, they had me on like a couple pills in jail. I go up there. There was like a bucket of pills. And I'm like, I don't take noon meds. And they go, you're taking them. These are your pills. And I'm like, maybe they're vitamins or something.
They didn't tell you what you were taking?
No. First of all, this was the wrong person's pills.
Oh, shit.
They forced me to take this, bucket of pills. So I swallow it down. I go back to my bed. All of a sudden, like maybe 20, 30 minutes later, my heart starts pounding out of my chest. One of the side effects, they almost killed me right here. Drool, buckets of drool. I've never experienced anything like it in my life. Whoever they were giving those pills to must have been a doozy.
I've seen it.
Yeah, and I've done every drug known to man in huge quantities at this point. And have you ever seen The Walking Dead where the zombie's on the ground and he's crawling with his arms because he doesn't have a bottom half? I was doing that back to the med line. And I'm crawling, and they dragged me back to my bed and just threw me back in there to sleep it off. Okay? So then I wake up, and I'm on 9 medications now. Okay? Now, these are pills that I don't really need, okay? I'm completely healed from the meth psychosis, and they're just prescribing me whatever's on the menu. See, these reps will come in, and that's who you do see come in, is you see the pharma reps coming in. They'll come in, they'll go to the doctor's station. Now, what do you think when you think of a state hospital? You think that people are there to get therapy, they're there to get better, they're working out issues. No, I've never seen, I lived in the state hospital system in Texas for 8.5 months. I never, not one time, saw the doctors walk out on to the actual floor and talk to people or do any kind of one-on-one treatment. You had one treatment team meeting per week, and it's only to check the levels of your medication. Now, they had me on lithium, so they were drawing blood once a week, too. Because they have to. Wow. Yeah, and I felt like I was under chemotherapy. Some of these drugs, you start stuttering. Like, I could hear my thought, what I wanted to get out. But and I couldn't even speak. Now, I'm totally normal, but these drugs are like reversing me back worse than when I was in addiction.
That's nuts.
Yeah, they want no trouble out of the patient population, so they drug them silly.
Yes.
You know, the whole population is drugged with something. They're much easier to manage.
And if Seroquel is what's on the menu and what's popping and hot that week for the pharma reps, then everybody's on Seroquel. Do you think it's a coincidence everybody needs Seroquel instead of trazodone? And then they'll swap it back, and it's like it's just a consumer product, and they're giving it out, and these drugs are actually killing us from the inside out.
Yeah, Steph, we love the pharma reps because they'd always pay for lunch for us. If we just came to listen to them, we got good food. We didn't have to pay for it. We just listened to their bull crap for a while.
Yeah.
You know.
So I'm healed now, right? So I start forming a plan. I'm like, okay, I've only got a month or so here. 2.5 months go by, and I'm devising a plan. I'm like, I'm a model patient. It's really a prisoner, but they call us patients. Now, I want you to understand this. The reason why nobody ever leaves the state hospital system in Texas or anywhere else, why it's almost impossible to get out, is because they get paid now, this is back in 2019. They were getting $1,150 per day per patient. You could look it up online. I did it later on while I was locked up. And it's like, and then now you've got a pod of 40 people, and you've got 8 to 10 pods on a unit. How much money is that per year? Wow. It's millions of dollars. Okay, so I passed what's called the Danger Review Board, which means that you can step down. If you're a good boy or girl, you can step down into a less restrictive hospital where like the restraints policy goes away. Okay. So it sounds like a good thing. Now your mom or dad can send you care packages, all these extra perks. So I pass and I'm shipped down to San Antonio State Hospital. So I'm thinking, okay, the rest of this will be a cakewalk. I've got about 10 days and I'm going home. My lawyer's telling me this. He's like, you're going to go to this next place. They're going to evaluate you and you're out of there. The first day I meet a maniacal doctor, this lady, and she tells me, she says, Mr. Durkin, she goes, 10 more days, another month. She's like, the average safety evaluation, it takes 3.5 to 5 years once you get to this part.
Oh, no.
So, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I can't live in hell for another 3.5 to 5 years. I was like, I got to get out of here. So I'm in there, and now my spirit's crushed, right? I'm like, you're living in hell. Think about the craziest thing or story you've ever heard, times 10 on acid. And that's what you're hearing from other patients all day. Child abduction and terrible torture. And these are just delusions. These are demons speaking through these people.
Yeah.
You're playing chess with the guy who killed his wife,
and
strangled her.
The psychiatrists are not the top of the notch.
No.
We had one. We had one guy. They called him Dr. Freud. He worked in one of the psychiatric units. He dressed like Freud. He had a pipe like Freud. He walked around like Freud. He acted like Freud.
Wow.
And one of his patients really got pissed off at him. And what they taught us in graduate school is that schizophrenics were too disorganized to plan anything that was real, detailed or serious. This guy, this one patient who hated this doctor, because he did exactly to this guy what Patrick is saying that they did to him. They just drowned him with psych pills, and the more he acted up, the more that they fed him. So he got fed up. And one night he slipped out of his room, and he got past 2 nursing stations, went down to the first floor where Dr. Freud's office was, picked the lock, got up on his desk, crapped in the middle of his desk, and shaped it into a pipe like the pipe that Dr. Freud smoked. And then he escaped from the hospital, and they never found him again.
Wow,
pretty creative.
And I was in an art class one day. They have once in a great while they'll have an activity. This lady who's been at the hospital forever tells me this story. Now I'm in this other wing of the hospital now where we go to the arts and crafts stuff. And they give you cotton balls and glue and stuff. It's nothing crazy because people would be killing each other, right? If you had scissors and stuff. So I was in there and this lady's telling me this story. There's pictures on the wall from the 1800s. San Antonio State Hospital was this draconian brick building, and they built onto it, but the original building looked something out of a horror movie. And she was telling me this story. She goes, you see those pictures? Now, these are people with vacant stares, real patients in these old black and white photos. They were brilliantly framed, still on the walls. She goes, what they used to do here at the hospital was they would send the less desirable of the family. So the elites of San Antonio were sending their homosexual, alcoholic, pregnant teenage daughters there, whatever, right? They would take a metal hook, a spike with a little tiny hook on the end of it. They would shove it into their eyeball and scramble the front of their brain and pull it out. It was a frontal lobe lobotomy.
Right.
Jerry, that's accurate?
That's accurate. What they did have a lobotomy mobile that drove around the United States to all these different towns and administered those lobotomies.
And electroshock. They had a whole room.
Oh, yeah. I remember seeing one of those. I mean, it was
And how long ago was this still going on?
They're doing it right now. Not as bad as in the days when I was there.
Now they're doing it with pills. Right. That's the only difference.
They're still using shock machines.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're not like the ones I saw where they. Let me tell you what the ECT looked like. Okay, I only saw one, and I almost fainted, and I got a strong stomach. So a friend called me, said, "Hey, they're doing a demonstration over here. Come on over and watch it." And I'd never seen one, so I went over there, and here's this foreign doctor. I don't know, he was Cuban or from some other country, and here he's lecturing this bunch of students like he was on TV or something. It's like he was getting off on this, and he was explaining what was going to happen and what had happened, and he started showing these electrodes. They were about this big around, like about an inch square, and just wires running to them, and a slab of metal. And I'm going, then he greased them with some kind of gel. And I asked him, I said, well, what's that for? And he said, well, that's to help the electricity pass through. If we didn't put that gel on there, the electricity would burn their heads.
Skin. Wow.
Yeah, it would burn their skin. So I watched him grease that up. And then he was talking about something else. And they finally brought in the patient. And it was this frail old lady who could barely walk. She was hanging on to two nurses, and she was heading for that gurney like she'd done this before. And she automatically just sat down on the gurney, just like a good girl, very frail, couldn't walk hardly by herself, laid down on the gurney, and then they started strapping her down with these metal straps, kind of like with your wheelchair thing.
Yep.
The legs were strapped, the thighs were strapped, the chest was strapped, the rest of the arms were strapped. I'm going, well, why are you doing that? And they go, well, when we give her the shock, we didn't do that. She could break bones when she convulsed.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like thinking, a treatment that breaks bones, you know? And they strapped her down. And then finally, when they got all ready, they got this big horse needle. It was about that big around, about that long. I mean, it was the biggest needle I ever saw. And it had this white milky fluid in it. I asked the psychiatrist, I said, what's that for? He said, that's a muscle relaxer. If we didn't give her that, she would break her bones within the straps.
Wow.
And I watched how he did it. He stuck it in her vein. He didn't just push it in there. He squished it back and forth and mixed it with blood and then pushed it slowly in there. And I'm like, oh. You know.
Wow.
And
barbaric.
Yeah. And he's like getting off on this, you know. He reminds me of one of those snake oil salesmen up on this, you know, stage trying to sell snake oil.
That's a mad scientist, Jerry.
Yeah, it was
Human experimentation, man.
So he backs everybody away from the gurney and he says, "I'm about ready to administer the shock." You know.
Now the thing about it is like some of these people are really dangerous human beings. Okay. Some are not. You've got a various spectrum. You've got like people who are, mentally challenged. And then you've got these top tier evil villain types.
Yeah.
There was one guy I was in there with. Later on, I find out he was so dangerous that the first day I saw him, I looked down at his leg and he had an ankle monitor inside the institution. He was too crazy for prison, and they put him in the mental institution, and they put an ankle monitor on him so that if he got off property and hopped the wall, they didn't want to take any chances. He had violent sexual thoughts, rage, violent thoughts every waking moment. That's what his court documents read.
Let me finish
I looked him
this
up online.
Well, let me finish this shock story.
Oh, okay,
So they injected this huge needle into her, and she kind of passed out. He cleared the table, and he goes, "Okay, I'm ready to give her the shock. Don't get away from the gurney." And they did, and she just writhed within those straps. It looked like she was going to break those straps loose. She was just convulsing in there.
Wow.
And I was just looking at that, and I was shocked, you know. And then I'm going, like, how long is this going to go on? Because she's just jerking around in these straps, and it just seemed like it went on forever. Finally, he shut it off, and he starts talking again like the salesman. And I'm looking at this poor little old lady, and she's turning cyanotic. She's dead. Wow. She's on her way out. She's purple. And finally, I'd stop him, and I'd say, "Hey, she's turning cyanotic." And he goes like an afterthought. He goes, oh, and he grabs these chest shocker things, and he puts them on her chest, and he gives her a shock, and she comes back alive again. And after that, I almost fainted. And they were doing 3,000 of these every year at Central State Hospital. 3,000. Each one was showing measurable neurological damage to the brain. A neurologist, because after one shock, a neurologist could see the damage that it was doing to their brain.
Wow.
This is the psychiatric mafia's, bull crap. And was anybody being cured by that?
Hell no.
No. You know who was picking the ones who were getting the shocks? Were the attendants who were saying, "Oh, this guy's been misbehaving on this ward. I think he needs a shock treatment."
Right.
They were using it as punishment.
And San Antonio is less restrictive, so there's no restraints policy. So when I get there, there is more violence. I was on the Crockett unit at San Antonio State Hospital. You'd be sitting down and a girl would walk up and break some guy's nose right while he's watching TV. She's having a delusion. Now, if you're in the commission of an assault, you could be beating somebody to death. And if staff came over, if you threw your hands up and went like this, they can't touch you, or else staff would face criminal charges. So the violence was out of control. Sexual assaults, males sneaking into the female bathrooms. Wow. I would shower, and you're in there with real top-level evil pedophiles, and you'd be taking a shower, washing yourself, and they would walk by, and they would look at you, And you can't do anything. If you show any signs of aggression, boom, another 6 months on your sentence. Safety evaluation, another 6 months. So you had to just take this stuff, right? So they had me on 9 pills, and I remember my male parts stopped working altogether. Your normal functions, if you know what I mean, stopped working. And I marched into the doctor's office. I was like, this is where I draw the line, man. I'm like, I'm not taking these anymore. I talked to this doctor, and I got him to agree. He's like, why should I take you off your medication? He's like, everyone's on medication. And I told him, I was like, listen, man, I was on drugs for 2.5, almost 3 years straight on meth before I did this crime. I said, I got healed when I was in jail, and they gave me this court finding, and I came here. And he's like, what? He's like, what are you talking about? He goes, you were on drugs? And he started to like get really alarmed. They called my social worker, and I'm terrified at this point because I think they're going to overturn my case and send me to prison. Yeah. And I didn't understand the law. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't know about double jeopardy and all that. So it's already signed into law. They couldn't do anything, right? Yeah. So he takes me off these pills. This was a huge part of me getting out. He says, I'm going to give you a 4-month period. I'm going to do this safety evaluation with no medication. And if you have no outburst or violent behavior, I'll leave you off the medication for the duration that you're here. And I did. And I got off the pills. And 2 weeks after he took me off the pills, the doctor died.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yes. He was like an older guy, and he had a heart attack, and he died. Yeah. But he already signed it into my chart, and it was already good. So I start devising a plan. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get out of here. And I started witnessing the atrocities behind the 4 walls of this hospital. Now, client's rights, there's a client's rights handbook. It's about 75 pages or 100 pages long. I read it like 100 times. You can't force patients to take showers or baths. So they're defecating, they're urinating, and they're just sitting there. This is somebody's daughter or son, and they're sitting in their own feces. Their jeans would turn brown and different colors from the grime. These are people's kids, and they're walking around stinking. Okay. And which is abuse. Okay. That's abuse to a mentally challenged patient. So I start seeing all this, and I saw this one guy from Corpus Christi, where I'm from. He went out underneath this oak tree, and he beat this girl half to death. He was kicking her in the face. He went on a tangent rage for about 45 minutes inside the unit after. Nobody could touch him. She was in a wheelchair for about a month after this incident. I have a journal. I'm taking down names, dates, times, the names of the victims, getting information. So I'm keeping these journals. And along the way, I figured out that my mom could send me a cell phone if she had the place, take the cell phone store, take the camera out of it. I could have a device legally with inside the walls of this place.
Yeah, they didn't want a camera.
You can't have a camera because of HIPAA. Yeah. But I had a phone, I had Facebook, I had YouTube, Google, email, and everything to the outside world now. My mom actually did it. She went from down in Myrtle Beach, mailed me the phone, I got it. So I was there one day, and this is where it takes the turn. I'm in the Crockett unit. Everyone's pounding on the plate glass windows. It was like a zoo. They were like throwing a mini riot this day. But it looked like chimpanzees, heavily medicated, just throwing this huge fit. And I raised my voice, and I got out of pocket, and I started screaming, because after a while, you'll crack mentally because of all the crazy stuff. I mean, I had a transgender roommate. And he would start screaming at the top of his lungs at about 10 p.m. all throughout the night. So I had to learn how to sleep like that. So you're mentally cracking slowly over a period of time. So I raised my voice. This nurse comes up and she says, Mr. Durkin, she goes, you're taking the medication. She goes, and if you don't, we're going to inject you with it. And if that happens, it's a minimum 6 months tacked onto your safety evaluation, because now you're showing aggressive behavior. I was a 46C, and it's very bad to show aggressive behavior because you're basically there, essentially, you're trying to prove that you're sane. And they can hold you for the duration of the top punishment of your crime, which for me was 99 years. So any hiccups, I could potentially be there the rest of my life. It was like the spirit of God. It was something out of a movie. She comes up to me, and she knows, all the staff knows that I'm completely normal now, right? Now I'm not even on medication. I'm acting totally normal like I am today. And they all felt bad for me. And she came up to me and she says, you know what? She goes, if you calm down right now, I'll leave this out of your chart. She goes, I won't give you the medication but you have to calm down right now. And I said, okay. She turned to walk away, and she spun around, and I'll never forget this. She goes, Mr. Durkin, if you don't like the way things are in this place, I suggest you write a letter. And if you do, I'll take it up to the White House myself. Now, the White House, it was the nickname for the administrative building, okay? Where all the top brass in the hospital is. A doctor up there is so powerful with one stroke of his pen, no matter what your crime is, he could release you from the state hospital back into society. So I did. I sat down and I wrote a 4-page letter in 5 minutes. And I said, I used to be in business. I'm well-spoken. I'm not on any medication. I have a cell phone with access to the outside world. And I said, the longer that you keep me in this hospital, I'm going to be a problem from your evil, corrupt system. And I started naming off all these events and names of people that I had kept track of. She took it up there and they actually read a letter from a crazy person, right? And they held this meeting and sent me to a different unit. Like, I thought it was in retaliation. But they sent me to the Crockett unit. They were devising a plan to release me right then and there. They're like, we've got this guy in here who's witnessing all the stuff about the druggings, the beatings, the molestations. There was one molestation case where the guy with the ankle monitor, he was bribing patients to go into the bathroom, and they were doing with whatever together, okay? They had the mind of children. One of them was an HIV positive patient. He was a male prostitute on the street. And I had big care packages. My mom was sending me tons of chocolate, chips, sodas, everything. I bribed the victim, one of them, for his sister's phone number, and I got on the hospital phone, cordless phone, and I called her and I said, this is what's happening to your brother. You need to call up there. And they verified the story. They tried to cover it up. They didn't want the bad press. So Adult Protective Services swarmed. I wrote 12 letters in all. Everywhere they moved me, God would have this amazing thing pop off, and it gave me the opportunity to cause a big problem for this hospital, right? So the final straw was, now they're trying to release me at this point. I'm at the very end. My roommate was this very dangerous, terrible human being. He threatened to kill his family. He had a wife and small child. They would come to see him on visits, and he's on the phone. The hospital heard him threaten the family. Said, I'm going to kill you when I get out of here. And they covered it up, didn't do anything. And a week later, I was underneath the oak tree outside, and I was on a bench. And he comes up to me and he says, I'm going to go get this 20 grand, man, and I'm going to get out of here. And you're like, yeah, whatever, man. Everybody's so crazy, right? He hopped the wall about 20 minutes later, and he just walked right off the property because they didn't close the gates. He walked right through an apartment community where kids played and just walked off, and he was missing. So I'm waiting for the news story and everything. Now, they reported it to the cops, but not to the people of San Antonio, that there's this violent, insane patient walking around the city. So I had my phone, and the Holy Spirit told me, send a message to the news station. And I got a hold of Ken's 5 San Antonio. Now, you can look this up on YouTube. San Antonio State Hospital escape. I broke this story while I was inside the institution.
That's great.
So they messaged me back, and they were like, you can't have a phone inside the state hospital. And I dropped a GPS pin. And they were like, what's this guy's name? We're going to call up there. They verified the story. They ran this huge hit piece on the hospital that night. Wow. The next day, they did a huge expose. There was like 9 escapes the previous year that never got reported to the public. One guy chopped his wife up into 1,000 pieces. He was one of the people who walked off. Yeah, so they were building a brand new hospital, a $380 million addition to San Antonio State Hospital, all publicly funded by the police department and all these other public entities, University of Texas and all this. They didn't want any bad press. And within a month, they had kicked me out of there, and I was a free man with absolutely no criminal record of any kind.
That's great.
And I got this story, this bird's eye view of the atrocities happening behind the walls. I mean, you're talking molestations and worse. Violence to the I mean, patient on patient crime is not prosecuted. So if I beat you halfway to death, the police come up and take a report, but then you have to wait till you get out years later. Now, these people have the mind of an 8-year-old child. They don't even remember what happened to them last week. They have to go down and file formal charges years after the fact. These places are an absolute for-profit experiment for the government of the United States.
And Jerry, you said this stuff is still going on. There are places that operate in this manner all across the United States, you'd say?
Well, I'd say what Patrick is saying is kind of like the worst end of it. I worked at Central State Hospital in Central Georgia for 7 years, and some of the back wards were that bad, but for the most part, they weren't as violent as that. There was some bad stuff happened. I remember one guy, one patient, the ceiling caved in one day because there were so many termites. The ceiling just fell in on him with thousands of termites fell on him. The paint was, peeling off the walls. There were assaults. It was interesting because psychiatrists were getting assaulted there more than any other staff except attendant staff who were with these people 24 hours a day. And I'm like, yeah, like Patrick said, they bring you in, they say, how you doing? You're hearing voices, da-da-da-da. How's your meds? If you have any complaints, they'll increase your meds.
And in the news report that I broke, you can see they have a picture of the bent over fence, and there's a banner on it, and it said now hiring $12 an hour. That's how much they were paying the techs to live in there 10, 12 hours a day with this environment. Yeah,
they were low paid.
Yep. But it's one of the lowest funded states for state hospital in the nation. I think behind like Mississippi, I believe. That's it.
Yeah, I remember there was one guy. He was a thin black guy, and he was on the second floor of the psych unit I worked on, and he was shadow boxing every day when I was doing my rounds. He's shadow boxing up and down this corridor. And I'm like, hey, Ruben, what's the deal? He's going, I'm training for the fight. Who are you going to fight? Can't tell you. Next day, same thing. Shadow boxing up and down that. That went on for about a week. And then one day I'm up there and I'm in the day room, and the psychiatrist is coming up the stairwell onto the floor where the nurse's station is. He just tops the stairs. He walks into the day room, and this guy comes shooting out of one of the wards like a cannonball. Runs right up to him and just decks him, just knocks him cold. He falls to the floor, and then I'm like, oh my God! And then the next day I saw that guy. He's slumped up against the wall. He's drooling, like Patrick said. He's drooling, and I go, hey, Sherman, what happened to you? And he goes, damn Dr. Grant, he did this to me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. If they got into any trouble, boy, they would just drug them silly.
Yeah, that maniacal doctor who gave me the bad news about the 3.5 to 5 years, my transgender roommate laid her out cold. Yeah, the doctors get attacked because the patients think that the doctors are behind everything, and it's the drugging, and so there's a lot of resentment. Yeah,
I had one patient who had gone off her meds. She was doing good in the vocational class she was in. It was her third time she went off, and if they go off 3 times, we had to discharge them. So her mother said, please don't do that. I can't deal with her. I'll come up there. We'll talk to her. And we asked her, both of us were begging her, why did you go off your meds? You know what happens when you go off your meds. She said, you won't believe me. I said, try me. I've seen some really weird stuff since I've been here. I don't think anything you say is going to throw me out of kilter. And she goes, the voices told me that the doctors were poisoning me, and they were pointing to the side effects of the drugs as the toxic reaction of the poison. And that was technically, it's true. Yeah. Those nasty side effects are toxic effects of those drugs because they are poison. And here's just a few of them: diarrhea, drowsiness, anxiety, sleep problems, insomnia, breast swelling or discharge, changes in the menstrual period, weight gain, swelling of the hands and feet, dry mouth, stuffy nose, blurred vision, congestion.
I'm a
What
five-time
else we got here?
suicide survivor, and every time that I had one of those suicide attempts, I had three major ones. I was on antidepressants. The number one side effect in the insert is suicidal thoughts. And
Yeah.
it's like it's an antidepressant, but you could have major suicidal thoughts. It's wild.
And those things barely work. I mean, they work just a lot of times just better than a placebo.
There's no such thing as a chemical imbalance. That was made
No.
up by Eli Lilly.
It was made up by Eli Lilly when they came out with Prozac. They needed some explanation. It was a total lie. They knew it at the time. They started teaching it in the universities. Big Pharma took over control of that, and they started teaching it to the medical students. They're coming out of medical school believing that mental illness is due to some kind of strange chemical imbalance of the brain.
Yeah.
And it's a complete lie, and they're still pushing it today. You know, I saw an advertisement a month ago. It says, it is believed that, you know, so they're changing their wording a little bit. There is no chemical imbalance. They've never proved it. The voices are not hallucinations. They've done no studies on those voices at all. They just went, we're psychiatrists. We hereby pronounce that the voices are hallucinations, and they are because we said so. They've done no research on it whatsoever. None.
Because they're really demons. And that's what it is. It's like there's a spiritual solution to this. And that's that. I mean, I'm on 0 pills. I have been clean from crystal meth and alcohol and every other mind-altering terrible substance for over 7 years of my life since this all unfolded. And I am clean today, and I help people get clean off crystal meth and other substances all over the planet. And it's because I follow Jesus Christ, and that was the experience I had. So I walked out of hell of meth addiction by following the light of the Lord. And that's what helps me every single day. And I find that most people, only 2% of us get and stay clean off crystal meth for the rest of our life. And I find that most people who've had these huge spiritual experiences on the drug, they all follow the Lord Jesus Christ, and they're all remaining clean for the most part. It's wild, but that's the data I've been getting, and I have interactions with hundreds of thousands of people.
Right on.
You know, and there's a new energetic psychotherapy that just cut out. It's a cutting edge stuff. It has 2 spiritual components.
Wow.
If it didn't have those, it wouldn't work. It's called the MACE energy method. It's cutting edge stuff. It gets rid of most psychological problems in an hour.
Wow.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that last time you were on. Maybe to close out, Patrick, thank you again for telling us your story. It's so important for the audience to hear this. Maybe you could give us any closing thoughts you have if folks out there are afflicted with something similar. What advice would you give them on how to navigate through it? And Jerry will close out with a little bit more about that new therapy.
So my recommendation is build a direct personal relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ and follow the light out of the hell that's meth addiction. You can reach me on Boston 2%. Boston 2% on TikTok, on YouTube, and all other platforms. Boston 2%. And you can get Fire and Ice, the Meth Bible, on Amazon.com. You can just simply search the Meth Bible. But find something greater than yourself and follow that and watch miracles happen.
Awesome. Wonderful. And Jerry, tell us a little bit more about that new therapy before we close out.
Yeah, MACE, it's an energetic psychotherapy. It's not a talk therapy. So it works with energy. And like I said, I've been on the front lines of mental health for close to 50 years. I've never seen anything work like this as quickly as it does with permanent results. You know, it's and what's even more fascinating about it is the therapist does not, it goes after a trauma, because most psychological problems are due to some kind of trauma that gets buried in the subconscious. And then it becomes what they call a negative identity. So it's like a mind virus. It's kind of like a computer virus, works in the background, but it's during a trauma, what happens is you have this awful bad feeling that just stays there and torments you. And there's a decision that you make with regard to the part that you played in that trauma. You know, and it might be something like, this thing happened to me, so I'm worthless, which is one of the most common ones I run into. So I'm dealing with these people that something happened to them when they were 6 years old. Their mom did something or said something or something happened. And due to that, they decided when they were 6 years old that they were worthless. And here they are now 75, and they're still feeling worthless. In an hour, that's gone.
Wow.
After all those years, it's gone. They feel lighter. They feel more grounded. So what it does is it operates kind of like if you get a brand new car battery, you charge it full and you drain that battery down to nothing. That battery's a boat anchor. You cannot recharge it again. So what MACE does is it finds this negative identity that was buried in the subconscious by the ego. So what happens is that pain from the trauma stays there for a long time. The ego shows up and goes, this isn't functional. It's interfering with your functioning. It's not doing you any good. Let me handle it. Takes it, throws it into the subconscious mind, and it locks it down so it can't get out. But it's buried alive in there. It's trying to get out. The ego is expending energy to keep it in. So what it acts like is like a landmine. So it's sitting there waiting for the right weight to come along and set it off. Now, the right weight is somebody who's similar to the person who caused the trauma in the first place. As soon as one of those people walks into the person's psychological sphere, that thing goes off. And it tells the person either attack that person or run from that person or avoid that person. It's like the person you hate, no matter where you go, that kind of person shows up. Shows up because you're carrying it around in your head. Wow. So once that stuff gets locked down, it gets projected back out, okay, but it's still with you. So one of the things it does is it projects it back out onto somebody similar to the person that traumatized you. The other thing it does is when you get into trouble with somebody or something 2 or 3 times, and you swear to yourself, I'm never going to get in this trouble again. 6 months later, you're right back there again. You go, how the devil did I get back here? That's that negative identity there. So it's a pool of negative identity, negative energy, along with a decision. 2 different components. MACE will identify both of them, turn them into a physical list, and then create a structure to the spirit, because energy moves from negative energy to positive energy. The spirit is positive. It creates the structure to connect that negative energy with spirit, and the spirit actually transmutes it to positive energy. So it's drained just like the car battery is. Once it's drained, it's dead. And you talk to the person, you go, okay, go back to that trauma. I want you to go right back to where you were, what's around you, see what happens. And you go, how do you feel about it now? And they go, it doesn't matter. I remember it, but it doesn't have any effect on me. In 1 hour, it'll do this. I think this method would take care of 75% of what psychiatry does.
Wow.
With no drugs. Now that there's, like Patrick was saying, there are those people out there. The only way you can deal with those guys is to drug them silly because they're so freaking dangerous. I've seen it in the hospitals. I've seen it in the prisons. They're so dangerous that you have to keep them drugged up.
And the thing you got to remember is they don't want anybody on the floor at those hospitals. It's very top secret, and they don't want outsiders coming in.
Oh, no, they don't. You try to get into one of those places. Just say, hey, I'm a researcher. I'd like to take a look and talk to some schizophrenics. You're never going to get in there. You won't get into the mental health center. You won't get into a private psychiatric hospital. You won't get into a state hospital. In all the years I've been working in psychiatric settings, I have never, ever, even once, seen any kind of researcher on any of those units. They will not let them in. They'll tell, oh, it's too dangerous, or we can't take the risk, or risk management won't allow us in.
It's an experiment.
And the ones that did get in, sometimes the legislature would want to let one of the legislators would want to walk through. Boy, they were surrounded by about 10 administrative staff, and they weren't allowed to speak to any of the inmates. Mm-hmm. They didn't want anybody that they didn't know speaking to the prisoners or the patients. Like Patrick was saying, the parents never got onto the wards. They would take them out to a visiting room or something like that, but they wouldn't ever let them see what was actually going on in those wards, the conditions under which they were living. This is the psychiatric mafia's top institutions, these state institutions. Now, the private ones are, they're a lot better. You don't have that kind of stuff going on. In the private institutions, they're a lot smaller. They get a lot more money. But what they do is they keep those patients in there till they run out of insurance money, and then they throw them out. None of them are getting any better. All those psychiatric drugs do is treat symptoms. They don't get to the cause of the matter at all, like this energetic psychotherapy. The name of it is causism because they named it that because it gets to the cause of the mental problem and eliminates it. And it does it without any drugs.
Well, this is such important information. Jerry, Patrick, I want to thank you both again for coming on.
Thank you.
We'll definitely have to revisit this. There's so much more that we can discuss. And like I said, it's super important to bring the audience's attention to some of these things because I wasn't aware that they're still running these facilities in any capacity the way that you have described. So it's extremely disturbing. Before I let you go, Jerry, what was the best way the audience can find out more about you? Your website one more time?
They can go to jerrymarzinsky.com, and there's a couple of videos about the MACE energy method there. There's how to get involved with it there. And you can order this book from there or Amazon. This talks about the psychotic voices, how we determined that these things were not hallucinations.
Right on.
Sherry Sweeney, my co-author here, she was hearing those voices when she was a young girl. And she kept that from me for 10 years one day. And then one day she told it to me, and I didn't believe it because she's one of the most spiritual people that I know.
It's an awesome book. I read it. It's awesome.
Well, right on. And Patrick, I will have links to your book as well in the description. And did you have a website?
My big one is TikTok, Boston 2%, TWOPRCT, Boston 2% on TikTok. That's where I get the most interaction. And Fire and Ice, the Meth Bible, is the realest book about meth and the devil you'll ever read. 716 pages of fire.
On. Gentlemen, thank you again. We'll definitely be talking in the future. Until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. See y'all then.
God bless.